Hey everybody, already here we go. So yeah, firstly, thank you to all who took the time to comment last week, both really sort of for and against responding to the Hambini hatchet job. But trust me, there's going to be a lot of excellent technical information in this response. So yeah, it's a good opportunity to talk about a few things on the testing front as well. And at the same time, I get to correct something that's obviously quite bad against myself and ZFC, and show somebody who is very bad for what they are. So yeah, unlike what you'll see, I guess, with many others, what you won't get from me is anything that's wishy-washy or vague. You'll see me address every point directly. My style is, if anything, to go too deep on answers, but that I think is better than being vague and misleading and misdirecting, which is a common issue with people answering questions or critiques in general. So I'll be addressing every critique point very specifically. Two quick notes on that though. I will be zooming through a lot of the stuff with regards to the bearings that he's put in the document, because I'm going to be doing a separate video on the bearing side of things, because that is just a whole thing in itself. He's done quite a job with his, I guess, campaign against hybrid ceramic and as to why you should buy his steel. And that's worth really doing that job properly. So a lot of that stuff I'll try to zoom through on this one, because we're going to get to all that. On the flip side of that though, there will be times where I guess just a single sentence of his, I'm going to have about 3 pages of reply, because some of the sentences are so insidiously dishonest, and what they're trying to mislead and misdirect people towards about myself and ZFC. It just really is worth understanding what he's doing there and what sits behind it. So yeah, where possible, so that this doesn't turn out to be a Leo Tolstoy length episode, I'm going to try to zing through stuff. But there will be some points that even if it's a short point by him, it's going to be a detailed response from me, to say the least. But it will be worth it, and you will understand why as we get through it. Now, forgive me, I'll be reading a bit because I've tried to script some of what I'm, or a lot of what I'm saying today. Otherwise, yeah, if I was just to try to riff it in my normal speak, this would be 3 hours long. All right, so yeah, forgive me doing a bit of reading as I talk. Make no mistake, before we begin, that Hambini did not do this article in good faith to try to help educate the cycling world on something they should know about. If it was, he wouldn't have made so many ridiculous mistakes and tried to convey so many frankly stupid points. If it was ever going to be honest, he would have contacted me with his concerns. He would have checked extremely important details that in missing he completely embarrasses himself. Had anything about what he's doing here been genuine and honest, it would be a completely different article. He contacted me about nothing, well, other than to alert me to some of his audience threatening to horrifically kill my wife in front of my child, because doing that over concerns on lubricant testing is a sane and rational response to things. So this is a long planned hatchet job, because I upset him years ago by daring to question him about his ceramic versus steel information. It was always coming for that reason and that reason alone. It is a revenge attack due to him being offended, which obviously makes him a very petty man. Being a revenge attack, as you'll see, honesty doesn't really come into the equation by him. And even the engineering side at times is done surprisingly poor, considering that he is an actual engineer. As some have already pointed out in the comments on the Prelude video, the actual substance of his attack from a technical perspective is extremely thin, and he's often trying to make something from nothing, and there are a lot of times where he's using frankly BS engineering babble to, I guess, confuse and mislead the large part of his audience that may lack the technical savvy to see through that. Alright, last bit of the intro, because I think this is important before I actually go into point by point through his document and tear down each point that he has tried to hatchet me with. I think it's important just to get some background on zero friction cycling, because it really helps to understand that if you are new to ZFC and seeing this for the first time and don't know what the hell's going on with ZFC testing versus Hambini. So basically, the testing that I do, it was inspired, I guess, to really sort of carry on from the great work that was started by Jason Smith of Friction Facts. So we lost Friction Facts when Ceramic Speed bought that, and Jason Smith went across to Ceramic Speed. We no longer had an independent test facility. But Friction Facts, as awesome as it was outright efficiency based, and a lubricant's outright efficiency in a clean lab is not always going to be, and it's sort of rarely going to be, I guess, the best indicator as to how lubricant is going to perform out in the real world over, I guess, real world cycling and real world use conditions for most cyclists, where you're just going to be reapplying that lubricant. And how does it go over time with exposure to contamination? What is that lubricant's performance? So I wanted to carry on, but set up a test that, assess lubricants over, really a test that is thousands of kilometers long and with both dry and wet contamination. It took months of testing to establish the main test protocol and to check the test variability. It took years of testing to get a big enough database of tests done. I think from memory I had around 15 tests done at the time, after frankly years of work before I started my first contact with a cycling media publication to see if they were interested in doing some wider awareness of the work I was doing. So suffice to say, the start was a long slog. No one knows about you, you're not making any money. We did have a retail side from the start. We're selling barely anything, and we're just grinding away on trying to build up the test database. There are some great aspects about the ZSC test that give information and insights into a lubricant's performance across a range of conditions and suitability for certain riding demographics, but there are also some key limitations and weaknesses of the test. There are, at the end of the day, for all tests currently in this space, there are key strengths and limitations to all of them. So, for instance, ceramic speed efficiency testing is relatively short and clean lab based. So was wheel energy, and that had a host of other concerns. Read the data that I've covered in a previous video. Silverstone have a chain efficiency test rig that's quite far removed from, how a chain actually is going to be operating on a bicycle drivetrain. So results from that testing could favour a particular lubricant type that's not necessarily going to be the right lubricant type for the actual use case on a bicycle chain. Other facilities that have tested, like SurfTech, also had, in my opinion, and I've documented through all that, some very big and clear errors and concerns with their testing, with some pretty wildly out there results. And we all know, I've done a pretty big deep dive on Muck-Off's testing. So in short, ZSC testing does indeed have some clear issues and limitations, and quite a high test variance. But keep in mind, all other tests have limitations and issues as well. But a key thing about, myself and ZSC is that I have been very clear about the limitations and the variances from the beginning. It's all been documented, it's all been communicated, and it's all been covered. So, testing bicycle chain lubricants, it really is a very difficult space. There is no easy way to get to where you can assess a bicycle chain lubricant's performance in clean and dry, say, off-road dust conditions and wet conditions, and have great, clean, clear results that are going to pitch one lubricant versus another. There's no standards testing in this space, so the work that we've been doing here, in the absence of all that, has obviously been very valuable, even with the limitations and high variance rate, which we'll go through. All right, we are just about to do the teardown point by point, but I just wanted to skip to one of the parts from his sort of summary and conclusion on his document, because what he said there versus published information, I think just summarizes extremely well where he's kind of screwed up the whole thing from the beginning. And if only he had bothered to do his homework. So in his summary, one of the sentences he has is, the disorganized nature of his test rig combined with the precise results he claims to measure are contradictory and, to put it bluntly, unbelievable. So I'll read part of that again. Combined with the precise results he claims to measure. So let's have a look at what I have on my actual website, and then I'll also go to the test brief. Now, I do have an updated test brief, which I did cut a lot out. Now, this is a fairly recent update. I think this test brief has been updated for, so I'm going to estimate around about 3 months. Prior to that, the other test brief was up for, say, around 8 years. As part of making the test brief quite concise, I chopped many pages out of the original test brief, which was, surprise, surprise, pretty clunky. So, but I will, based on what's occurred here, I'm going to put that part back in. However, being that this was up for like 8 years, I don't think that there's still any excuse for him not knowing this. And again, he could have contacted me and I would have been able to tell him. It's also been covered on other, I don't know which ones, but other media interviews and stuff that we've had over the years. It's not been kept secret, to say the least. All right, now this is above the main test data on the website. Again, this is a relatively recent update where I've actually gone to explain what the data means better. However, I think it's been up there for probably about a month. And again, none of this has been secret from other documents and information. And again, he could have contacted me. All right, assessing a lubricant's performance via wear correlation is a blunt tool. Notice the word there, blunt, as opposed to the word precise. It cannot directly predict efficiency, i.e. if two lubricants return similar wear rate results, the ZFC test cannot say which may be a 5 watt loss lubricant or a 6 watt or a 4 watt ETC. As a blunt tool to measure performance, we are looking for very large differences in wear rate. As a high wear rate denotes rapid wear of the chain's steel parts, and it flat out takes friction to wear steel at a notable rate. So a 12% result versus a 15% result, I do not care. But a 10% versus 30% result is quite a significant difference. And results of very low versus very high wear rates, it is just extremely unlikely that a lubricant rapidly eating its way through your chain's hardened steel parts is a low friction lubricant. As such, the lower the percentage numbers, the better, as this is lower wear. Also, we look for notable changes by block, i.e. if a lubricant is impressive in block 1 but increases notably in block 2, then it has absorbed a lot of contamination and become abrasive. A little bit from the original test brief. So at the time of updating this test brief, Zero Friction Cycling has conducted over 250,000 kilometers of controlled testing on the above testing protocols, testing both lubricants and chains. Test results throughout this period have remained within a plus minus 5% variance. So we've got basically a 10% variance max, which is quite a large variance, but we cover that. This was stated, I believe, in the original test brief, and this update after some years of testing retains that. So we have me talking about the ZFC test being a blunt tool, that we're looking for large variances, and we state in the actual original test brief a plus/minus 5% or really a 10% grouping variance overall. That is quite important as we go through the document. All right, here we go. The murky world of ZFC, Zero Friction Cycling botch testing, frigged results. This, we'll circle back to murky world. It is funny that my world is murky, despite everything about my testing being open for critique. You wouldn't have been able to do the document like this if everything wasn't open for critique. Whereas his bearing testing and I believe aero testing remains secret. This article is not questioning the merits of chain waxing versus other methods, which is funny because, by gee, they sure do that later. It's an engineering investigation into the methods, results, and marketing behind Zero Friction Cycling, who appear to be not as legitimate or technically adept as they may portray. Zero Friction Cycling is a one-man operation run by Adam Kerrin, a former policeman with no formal engineering qualifications or engineering experience, his words. Adam's business revolves around selling friction-reducing products through his YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and his accompanying website. All right, now if you've been following me for a little bit, you will already know that my level of marketing on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook is basically non-existent. The YouTube I do just for education, and we have the website, which, I barely even remember to refer back to it. I think, if you've been seeing me for any amount of time, you'll know my level of marketing is about 0.1 out of 10. By friction-reducing products, I think what he means is bicycle chain lubricants, simply commercially available bicycle chain lubricants. I don't do any Zero Friction Cycling stuff, but just take note, I guess, of Hambini wording, because that's going to be a bit of a theme. It reminds me of a time when someone put on a resume that they used telecommunication technology to make and receive calls, by which they meant that they used a telephone. So the zero friction cycling business, it is two parts. There is the testing side, there is the retail side, where we sell the genuine best products that we find from the testing side. The retail side is simply needed to support the testing side. It is very difficult to have a viable business from testing, especially the very exhaustively long zero friction cycling testing. Mine is not a short, hours long clean lab based test. It runs for thousands of kilometers per test. It's a grind and it takes a huge amount of time and parts, and there is no way to make that as a viable business without the retail side simply selling the best stuff we find from the testing side. That is hardly an evil way to do business. That's the only business model that we can have that enables the business to actually exist. Only a very select few people have ever tried to, twist. We are selling and recommending the best products that we find from testing into something bad. And remember, we're a tiny business in Adelaide, Australia. People are using this information all over the world to purchase the products from wherever it makes sense in their part of the world. Oh, and before I forget, I should mention that whilst there is no zero friction cycling branded lubricant that I sell, Hambini sells Hambini branded bottom brackets. So there's apparently a conflict here with me, and I don't sell a competing product in the space that I'm testing in, and yet he has his own branded products in the space that he's untesting in. Interesting. Okay, next point. A quick buck without putting the work in. Oh my God, a quick buck. A few years ago, Adam reached out requesting access to test data, protocols, and detailed information related to tribological practices, data that is typically sensitive and not freely shared. I'll just keep it on the screen rather than flick back on this one. So no, I reached out to find out what was his test that had hybrid ceramic bearings being worse than steel after just 500 kilometers. It is rather inaccurate, to say the least, to frame my request of, hey, can you give me the information on your bearing test, as the results are somewhat interesting, to frame it as above. So frankly, to frame such a basic request like the above, it is just plain weird. One would not think I asked him about his bearing test at all based on that. Is he trying to write things in a way to bamboozle, mislead, misdirect, be dishonest to his readers? His next sentence was, not surprisingly, he received a similar response from Muck-Off and other companies, though he chose not to publicise those rejections as much. That whole thing is just so weird. What does he mean by publicise rejections? I've covered the whole thing. I've been trying to get answers out of Muck-Off for, 5 years. I've publicised the hell out of it. Alright, so this one is flat out false. I already knew what and how Muck-Off were doing with their testing. I simply wanted to know, with their full knowledge of both full tension testing and full load testing. And if you're unclear about all this, go and just watch the Muck-Off Files Part 2 video. Don't bother with Part 1. I am a rambling mess, more than normal. Part 2 will at least give you all the information you need to know about Muck-Off testing and my concerns with it. And so it's just weird as to what he's saying here. So yeah, I wanted to know from their knowledge of both full tension testing and full load testing, why were they testing long intervals on just their full tension test machine? And yeah, that will make sense if you go watch that episode. Suffice to say, knowledge requests to Muck-Off to understand why they were using the wrong machine the wrong way for their testing, and was this a deliberate choice to show key competitors to have poor results. They haven't been keen to respond to that specific point. It's not been about any tribological knowledge, nor was trying to get Hambini to give me the details of his bearing testing, which didn't make any sense. So already on two very simple points in actuality of what actually happened, he has twisted those to such a weirdly, you couldn't be more misleading. I don't know how you could write up, hey, Hambini, tell me about your, how you've tested the ceramic bearings and the steel bearings, and hey, Muck-Off, give me the details about why you're using just full tension testing for long periods when you know you shouldn't be. How has he twisted those two particular situations to that? Both of which have been fully covered and published. bizarre and misleading in the extreme. Point, Adam appears somewhat naive about what information is customarily disclosed in the business world, particularly given that in this case we are essentially competitors. Are we? Alright, so again, I have to say no. If a manufacturer is using a particular test or standards test to prove the performance of their product, and this forms part of the marketing for the product, then it is typically disclosed. There's generally very low value in marketing to say a product has excelled in X test if the details of that test or standard are secret. Hambini is using this to try to bolster his position around keeping the details of his bearing testing, which had very dubious results, and which he uses to try to convince the cycling world that ceramic bearings are snake oil, and buy steel bearings from him, secret. Isn't it funny how he puts in the title of his document, The Murky World of ZFC, when my testing details are fully open, and yet his testing protocols are secret? So this point in dishonest misdirection to try to cover his own murkiness, this will become extremely clear next episode when we dive into bearings. Okay, his narrative seems to suggest that anyone who is not entirely transparent with their protocols or testing must be concealing something and engaging in questionable marketing practices. The reality, however, is that Adam was unwilling or unable to acquire the required technical standards and seemed reluctant to undertake the necessary research himself. Okay, again, this is somewhat not correct, and by somewhat I mean 100%. This was again me simply trying to get the testing protocol and equipment that Hambini used for his 10,000 kilometer cycling test for bottom bracket bearings. Hambini refused to divulge the details of this test, just referring to that it is tested in accordance to various standards. But A, he has not named any specific standards tests that he used. B, there is no ASTM or other standards tests for cycling bottom brackets. So Hambini's test, showing ceramic bearings becoming higher friction than steel after just 500 kilometers due to, his information, the harder ceramic bowls damaging the comparatively softer steel races. This testing, which is the foundation of his argument for the ceramic being basically a cycling industry-wide con job, remains secret. This is simply a further attempt to cover his own ass regarding bearings and nothing to do with me obtaining tribological testing information. Hambini could easily substantiate his bearing testing by disclosing details of the test, the equipment used, and the protocol. It is his data and information, not mine. It is his to substantiate, not mine. I simply flagged to him the results did not make any sense against a lot of other information around hybrid ceramic bearings, and that I found it very concerning that the testing behind his information was secret. That's it. So all this other crap that he's saying about me not going out and getting this other tribological information and such, I mean, it is just, again, misdirection to try to fool his audience on just reading that crap. Nonetheless, following his request, I responded politely. I should find the emails because I have a different memory of that. Suggesting that he start with some foundational reading, specifically the book Tribology, Friction and Wear of Engineering Materials by Hutchings. His questions were typical of someone without technical experience or understanding of the field. In response, he claimed he didn't have the time to read the recommended material. So remember, I'm asking him to just tell me how he's conducted this testing that's assessed the bearings and the results that he obtained. Why would I need to start reading such a book when all we're after is Hambini to disclose how he tested the bearings? What was the test equipment, the test protocol? I remember Friction Facts, how Jason Smith disclosed all of that for his lubricant and bearing testing. Did any of us need to read the above book for Jason to have simply covered the testing equipment and the testing protocol that he used? Yes, I won't have quite have time for that, unfortunately, so this is just a part out of my email reply. My theory is those who know more than me will be able to explain to a non-engineer layman in layman terms why. Exactly, tell me what and how you tested. So again, let's say person, company X is claiming Y based on Z testing. The results are interesting to say the least. You ask for details of the test and they give you all that crap. Imagine if my lubricant testing was secret and I handled inquiries for details around my testing the same way. Dodgy AF, I think, would be the general consensus around the testing and why the details of the testing are being kept secret. None of us need to read that bloody book to know if Hambini wants to tell us how he tested those bearings and got those results. All he needs to do is tell us. Exchange continued, with Adam insisting I should be able to have the correct clear picture without reading engineering books to know what I should sell. If something is fact, there should not be counter information or intuitive question marks. I don't know why he's included that. I mean, exactly. So what that basically means, because at the time when I was having a look at his stuff, I was, taking out of the fact that, the data about the hybrid ceramic bearings is nuts, which we'll cover on the bearing episode. This is at a time when we're doing bearings that his one-piece housings looked, quite, I guess, something worth having a look at. So I was considering whether or not I should stock the Hambini, bottom brackets from that perspective. So it's basically, I was asking him with regards to that, but I was just, and I'd asked him about wholesale pricing. However, I did not wish to stock products where the information behind them was not substantiated. So when testing data makes no sense and the testing for that is secret, as such, I think the above sentence is perfectly correct. Following Hambini's logic, a bike shop would not be able to sell very much. Hey, why are you stocking that suspension when you haven't read the engineering books behind it? Hey, how can you sell that frame when you haven't read the engineering books behind the frame design and manufacturer? Hey, how can you stock and sell those wheels? Have you read engineering books on hoop stresses, hub flange design, and so on? What is he on about? Of course, myself or any other retailer in cycling should be able to stock and sell bottom brackets without having read the Hambini suggested engineering books. Can Hambini please advise all of the retailers that he currently supplies his bottom brackets to prove that they have read Tribology, Friction and Wear of Engineering Materials by Hutchings before they are allowed to stock his bearings? It's so nuts. Adam's motives became blatantly clear from that statement. He intended to conduct minimal research and focus solely on selling products that he could market at high margins. His claims of independent testing were nothing more than wishful thinking. That whole thing just makes no sense. So, because I didn't want to read that book before looking to stock his bottom brackets, that makes me focus solely on selling products that I could market at high margins. Again, can somebody please point this out to every existing retailer of Hambini bottom brackets? His claims of independent testing were nothing more than wishful thinking. I'm not sure if you can pack more absolute BS into a single paragraph. If he's meaning, then if he's switching the focus to, what I actually sell, which is lubricants, where I'm doing a huge amount of independent testing, and bicycle chain lubricants are not high margin. How much money does he think that we make selling bicycle chain lubricants? And if he wants to know, I even recently did a video covering the Zero Friction Cycling's previous year's financials. So I'd like to see Hambini do that. We make a very normal around 30 to 40% gross margin on lubricants and chains. And that's pretty much all there is between the wholesale price for a bicycle chain lubricant and the recommended retail price. After the costs of actually running a business, we're typically left with around 11% margin. So, because there's costs that obviously eat into your 30 to 40% gross margin. By doing minimal research, does he mean the countless hours that I've put into conducting testing for every product that we actually do stock, and that a product needs to be a top tested product in its particular class to be stocked and recommended by Zero Friction Cycling, and that we started with stocking just one product that we stocked and recommended, and we've slowly built up over 8 years. I don't even know how many years it took, because I don't want to know, for Zero Friction Cycling to break even from all the initial startup work and investment. It's something that I think a lot of startups don't want to have a look at. So is that the minimal research and effort and work that he's talking about. Now, this twisted paragraph of his, I find particularly insulting. So the ZSC testing work is a long, hard grind, constantly, and it needs to be supported by the sales from the retail side. So, and again, of which there's not this massive windfall from selling bicycle chain lubricants. So I challenge Hambini to perhaps have a look at my financials that I released and do the same. And I can accuse Hambini of a lot of things and be absolutely correct with that, but I wouldn't accuse him of a poor work ethic. And if he had, he would absolutely know the amount of work and grind that it's taken to do this testing and to build up the zero friction cycling business from, testing bicycle chain lubricants to what we have now. Minimal effort, making a quick buck on high margin stuff. Like what is he on about? I mean, that is just, it's bizarre, it's weird, and it's insulting, and it's stupid. All right, I'm going to park episode 1 there because at the rate I'm getting through the Hambini document, if I did this in one video, it's going to be a record. So when I can get to it over my holidays, I'm going to just record approximately 30-minute halves if I can sort of stop it in some kind of sane space. We are still really in the midst of this crazy argument over his bearing testing and bearing information at the moment. So that will continue on for episode 2, which I will try to get to recording tomorrow if I can. Let's get episode 1 out, and I think even episode 1, just getting a very small amount through his hatchet job document, should be starting to give you a pretty big picture as to what this document is all about and how just completely dishonest and full of crap, and in many places bizarre and weird information that he has tried to put out and mislead his reading audience. It's it's nuts, and it gets way more nuts. So stay tuned. It's going to be a wild ride. All right, till I can catch you on the next one. The next one we'll be able to get through a bit more. There's going to be no intro and foundation stuff like I've done today. It's just we'll be ripping back into the document.